Hello and welcome to ZED Talks. This is another exciting talk with a favourite of mine. Toby Kheng is here and Toby's in the house. Toby's going to tell you what Toby does, but it's really exciting what we're going to talk about today. But before we launch into it, welcome Toby. I'm so happy to see you today.
Oh, hello, Zoe. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I think, as we said before we recorded, when you have certain conversations in your diary, it just brightens up your day. So, yeah, I have been looking forward to this one all day. Really looking forward to getting into it.
Brilliant. I appreciate you being here and having time because I know that you also are a busy chap. Business is going well, which is awesome. So I'm going to ask you specifically around your career and a little bit about comedy. But first, can you kind of do an introduction about you, your company, anything you want to tell us?
Yeah, so my name is Toby Kheng. It's a silent H in the last name, if you must know. It's one of those last names you have to spell out when you're on the phone. Kilo Hotel Echo November Golf, if you are just listening and not watching and you haven't seen my name in the podcast description. And so I'm co-founder of Freeformers with my other co-founder, Emily Forrest. And essentially what we do is we employ customer experience design principles to employ experience design. So in the world of L&D, HR and people teams, looking to what either those industries have done in the past or, evolving what they're currently doing is just probably not good enough. So we bring in thinking from marketing, product design, customer, like analytics from those fields as well. We bring all that to the HR and people space to make a marked improvement on organizations.
Amazing. And there's so much need for this right now. So, and bearing in mind, please subscribe to the channel if you're listening to this. And Toby, description will be on how to connect with Toby, because I think this is super relevant in terms of what's happening in organisations now. There's a lot of shift, a lot of a lot of movement. And you know what we always say, change is a constant. There's always going to be change abreast. And how do you be change ready and not change fatigued? Not that you focus on change, but helping people evolve and grow, all of that good stuff. So thank you. So I know that you're a very funny chap. Okay. So, and comedy and humour is a big part of your identity, as I see it. And I hope I'm not going to offend you by saying this, but it's a big part of like how people warm to you, like it's a part of your personality. And maybe that's by design or maybe that's very natural. But either way, I see and feel and experience of you this beautiful humour that you have. And I'm just wondering, I know that it's a part of your world, and I would love to know and for you to share about what it means for you and how you got into comedy. And maybe we can talk about how it shows up at work, but I'll prompt you when we get there. Take me on the journey.
Well, it all started when I had a job about, 7 years ago, and essentially we were given £1,000 budget to allocate to our own development. It was a scale up at the time, so we didn't have an L&D team or a HR person or anything like that. So they said, okay, to recognise that we want to invest in your development, you've got a budget of £1,000. You come to us with a business case of what you should invest that £1,000 in, and we'll tell you whether you can do it or not. So I spent approximately half of it doing a behavioural economics course, because again, talking about like the world of customer experience design, behavioural economics has a lot to do with that. And I'll be honest, in the HR and people space, there aren't enough people talking about behavioural economics and how that has an impact. And particularly in the David Cameron government, when they had the nudge unit, they were using behavioural economics to change behaviour rather than policy. It's been around a while, and the fact that we're still lagging behind in our industry with behavioural economics is pretty annoying to me. But so, that's in part of the mission, but that kind of stemmed from that course I went on and kind of continued that research. But the other half, I was like, that's a very serious one, which I can present that business case pretty swiftly, and that one will get signed off. And then I was like, well, what do I do with the other half of the budget? And I was like, well, at that time I was kind of acting as this kind of hybrid consultant commercial director type role. And so I was like, well, I have to stand up and talk and pitch and present and articulate things in a really clear, succinct way. So I was like, some sort of presentation skills training maybe might be good. Now, do remember at this point, I'd probably been a stand-up facilitator, trainer, whatever, or an event speaker, MC, for about 10 years. So it wasn't necessarily about how can I get over nerves and get on stage and start talking in front of groups of people. I could do that. But how do I give it some form, structure, and humour that engages an audience. So the other half of the budget, I said, I want to do a stand-up comedy course, which, if I remember rightly, was a 2-hour session every Wednesday evening after work above the Umbrella Shop on Oxford Street, and just near to Tottenham Court Road Station, actually. And I did that for 6 weeks, or was it 8? It might have been 8 weeks, actually, with the 8th week was do a tight five stand-up set in front of about 200 people. And so that's how I got into it. That's how I got into started doing stand-up comedy. Had never got on stage to try and be funny before with intent. I think I'd always, by hook or by crook, have a slightly humorous, quick-thinking personality. So like those things tend to come up. But I started to understand the form and structure of what stand-up comedians do and why, they are probably the best storytellers and presenters of our age, because they get on stage with no script, with no PowerPoint presentation, but they're able to engage other people with humour, yes, but they're also shifting, perceptions of things, whether it's Nish Kumar with politics, Phil Wang about race, and, different cultural identities that he has, which resonates with me, obviously, as well. And then, Mae Martin about gender and sexuality. There are all Daniel Sloss about sexual assault. There are all these comedians that are, yes, get on stage and really funny, but they're actually shifting the way we think about the world as well. We're not in the Bernard Manning and Jim Davidson age of just let's tell really offensive jokes, unless you're Jimmy Carr. So what we're in the game now is that we've got these really authentic storytellers changing the world, and that's where I was genuinely interested. Is like, well, how can I just bring some of that in? Because long gone for me are the days of people doing shit presentations, essentially. And I've been to so many conferences. I was at HR and Learning Technologies yesterday, and if you want people to change the way they perceive and do things, is you have to, and you're going to get on stage to do that, you have to be engaging. It's not enough just to have, a really nice slide or, really catchy title. You've actually got to have that presence as well. So I think, even as a skill, just an interpersonal skill, it's really important. In a world of digitization, AI, automation, what's left is the human that sits behind that. And if you don't have those capabilities, then you'll be kicked out of the workforce quicker than you say boo to a goose.
Yeah, I think that there's so many things in there to unpack, which is around. So let's kind of go into some rabbit holes. First of all, I don't think it's a natural skill for everyone to be able to do what you've got. I think that it's a learned skill. So if you're very natural, like anything, if it's naturally in you to be quick-witted, to be able to resonate, to read the room, to understand what's happening, I don't know if that's teachable all the time. I think you can bring awareness to it, and it can be nurtured over time. Maybe that's the whole point, is that you've grown in that area.
So I told this story the other day, that if you were to tell my mum 20 years ago when I was 18 what I would be doing as a job and some of the things that I've done in the past 2, 3, 4 years, she'd be like, absolutely not. Toby will never do that stuff. So I was the most shy and retiring. I hated going, I didn't go to my sixth form prom because it was like I didn't want to hang out with people. I wasn't very outgoing. I was always mumbling my words. I was very, and still am introverted. My energy drains by being around people, but I gain more energy by being myself. So was a very, very solitary teenager. And even through university, probably didn't make the most out of the university experience because of that as well.
Right.
And so I accidentally fell into a job. After coming out of uni, I was a chef for some reason, and then fell into being a trainer for Curry's PC World, training people on product knowledge. Just because the criteria for that job was, do you have a passion for technology and can you explain it in a really clear way? And the only reason I went for that job is because I wanted a 9-to-5 job, because all my friends had got 9-to-5 jobs. Everyone who I had made friends with in hospitality had moved out of hospitality. I was like, well, I can't see my friends now because I'm working when they're out having a good time. So I literally took that job out of desperation for the 9-to-5. And they said, okay, you're a rough gem, but we can craft you into this person that is able to do that. So what I have there is, like, there was the motivation. There was the opportunity, which was a massive opportunity. Like, I can't underplay, Christine Knott and Andy Scrace, who kind of gave me that opportunity, was massive, because I wouldn't be here today had they not taken a punt on me. And they took a punt on essentially the 11 other people in that team as well. We're all hired in exactly the same way. None of them had training experience. And so it's probably that, as well as then the exposure to, getting up in front of 12 people for 4 days a week, for every week of the year I'll be working, and being in that and learning that environment. You had just done it in an incredible amount before I even got to stand-up comedy.
Yeah. But I suppose that's the point, is that when something is practice at all levels, practice. And I guess there's a lot of nerves that come along with anyone that stands up in front of anyone doing any kind of speaking, any kind of, and I think that that's something that can really cripple people from coming forward, that can really hold them back, can really be so damaging in a way. Like, the fear is damaging. But anyway, you've done it. So now tell us about, so you now, do you actively do stand up? Like, can we go and see you somewhere?
No. So I did quite a bit of stand up, open mic stand up in London before the pandemic,
Right.
and before children. And then the pandemic and 2 children happened, which meant my evenings weren't free anymore. And because of the pandemic, I wasn't going into London as much. And so the opportunity to work the kind of the open mic scene in London just disappeared, overnight, really.
Right.
I did a couple of virtual gigs, and I did 2, and I will never do a virtual comedy gig ever again. It's the worst thing. You don't get the call and response and laughter and all that kind of stuff.
Right? You talked about somebody taking a punt on you. They felt something. They felt that this was somebody that they wanted to take a punt on. There was something about your energy, whatever it is. And sometimes we can't often explain it. It's unexplainable, but there's just something that we kind of like feel, and we just know, we have a knowing that this is the right thing to do. And I guess, well, first of all, you've just done the HR British Awards, and for anyone listening, Toby accepted an award for me on behalf of Empowered AI, which was great. And you got to do a little skit with Emma Jamel, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Which is really good. So you're in the room. How did that feel, by the way?
It feels very natural now, like, as well, for 2 reasons. Always being on stage with Emma feels natural anyway. We've got such a good chemistry and connection, the amount we've talked over the past couple of years, and then, we did it last year as well at the British HR Awards. So there's that natural chemistry. The chemistry I have with, Emily in running Freeformers, and then the chemistry I have with Emma on stage, they're nurture relationships where, whatever we do feels quite organic and easy because we spend that time to build those relationships. But I think for both of us, it felt very natural because we have that mutual understanding about what each other are going to do. So we plan it and we structure it. But because we both have, Emma's done very, very similar training to me in terms of the stand-up comedy stuff, we were able to riff it, essentially.
Yeah.
Which riffing by yourself is straightforward because you're just in your own head and thinking about it. Riffing with someone else is really difficult.
Oh, God, it must be. I mean, that's nerve-wracking just thinking alone. If I have to, just thinking alone of doing, I can stand up in front of thousands and do a presentation, or kind of some kind of talk or stuff like that. As long as I know the subject and as long as I can talk around the subject because I'm a subject expert on that thing, it's not nerve-wracking. But then you throw in other people and you don't know what they're going to say or what even questions they might ask. It becomes a whole nother thing.
Which is almost like audience engagement 101, right? Because most speakers will speak from a very selfish perspective in that they have their structure, they have their slides, they have the message they want to do. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the best stand-up comedians, the first thing they'll do in probably the first 1 or 2 minutes is they'll do one of 2 things, or maybe both. One, they'll be self-deprecating. So they will say something about themselves that the whole audience are thinking, right? The second one they do is they will engage the audience. So they'll ask them a question, they'll try and get a call and response, or they'll talk to someone in the front row, right? They'll break the 4th wall. Right. And you're doing that by, I'm either saying what's on your mind, what you're already thinking, or I'm practically engaging with you. When you then get into a work-based environment, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a keynote, all of a sudden that goes out the window and it becomes for the audience a very, very passive experience. And like I say, incredibly selfish from the speaker's point of view, because what you're doing is you're designing around your own anxiety to make the experience of speaking easier for you. Which
Yes,
I'm not saying it's easy, and I'm not saying everyone can do it. But if you can't, then don't be a speaker, or at least practice it more,
I agree.
because you are doing a disservice to it.
Or
How dare
you,
you get on stage
yeah,
and not
and
be
then,
the best speaker possible?
absolutely, it's so important. That storytelling piece is so important, and who are you telling the story to? And I think that's another thing, which is because I think this is so relative. So first of all, in my brain, my pea-sized brain, what is happening right now is I think everybody that has a influence role, and I think that's most of the world,
Yep.
should learn how to present, or should learn how to incorporate their humanness, whether it's comedy. I think everybody could benefit from understanding that, especially Gen Zers, because they're more socially awkward than any other
Mhm.
generation. And that's a broad stroke, and I know that I'm being generalized in saying that. But like the storytelling component is so important. Why? Why is it so important?
Because you've got to engage, like the delivery of just information in a very linear way does not engage the brain. The brain switches off pretty quickly. So even
Yeah.
if you just look at, let's look at TikTok content creation, right? That trend where you pretty much say what the end of the video is at the very beginning, and then you go back to the beginning and then you take them on the story, right? It's a little bit Christopher Nolan-esque, but you play with the form. There's very few people out there just going, there are very few people out there that are engaging enough where they could just go, I'm going to record a minute's worth of video and it's just going to, I'm so engaging that that's going to be the piece of content. There are people that can get away with that. But most TikTokers and Instagrammers and all that kind of stuff have to play with the form to manufacture that engagement.
Yeah.
And that plays into presenting in the real world as well, or even on a virtual call like this one, is that you have to be able to engage your audience in different ways. And I think that's the thing that, myself and Emily, having worked with an esports team over the past couple of years, is that the way you stand up or sit down and attend a virtual meeting is not the same way you sit down and attend an in-person meeting. However, we try and treat those two things as the same, and they're not. You just look at what someone who hosts, a 2-3 hour live stream on Twitch does. The way they engage an audience virtually is very, very different to any skill set ever seen in the workplace. Yet no one's doing it in the workplace because they don't know how. And this
Yeah.
is to your point, right? Gen Z have grown up in a world where digital engagement in that form, they're very much used to. But then you get to work, you've got, in the nicest possible way, millennials and upwards,
Yeah.
completely incapable of delivering exceptional virtual experiences.
Yeah.
Not because of the technology's always existed, but they haven't created the culture of being able to do that. On the flip side, Gen Z haven't had that exposure to doing the in-person stuff, whereas millennials upwards have. So what you get is this kind of like digital native and in-person native workforces coming
Yes.
together, and you kind of got to meet in the middle because both are equally as important. What the pandemic made us do was try to focus on that digital stuff. And no workplace got the digital stuff right, to be quite frank, because they
I-
just tried to lift and shift the in-person stuff into the virtual environment and would hope it would work.
Oh, that's such an important. This is so important. Um, okay, so I think there's a couple of things here for me which are bubbling up. I'm a Gen X, and I know intellectually that everything you're saying is right, and I totally agree with it all. How do we help navigate? So maybe you can speak from experience because this is what your company does. How do we do that? How do we make this bridge? Because there's a bridge between having a form, and you said like a structure that needs to be different on how do we help businesses do that? How do you help businesses do that? Because I don't think they're brilliant. You're right. They're not brilliant at storytelling. They're not marketeers, by the way. Now, I say this over and over again. People first professionals do not know how to sell or market because that's not their profession. It's just
Mm.
not. Sales and marketing people often don't know the intricacies of dealing with humans. I mean, you'd think they'd like to, but not always, right? So,
Yeah.
like, how does it play out in work? How does it help, the storytelling? And how do you, with your clients, maybe think about that bridge and how you help them evolve with this?
Well, I think so. Again, speaking generally, if you're millennial upwards, you're probably in a leadership
Mhm.
those generations make the majority of leaders in organizations. So they are the ones that don't have these digital native skills. So the incoming workforce or the younger workforce, you're unable to lead them because you aren't able to communicate at their level, and likewise they can't communicate at your level. So in that world, whose prerogative is it to change? Is it Gen Z and below or millennials and above? Well, I would say millennials and above are in leadership positions and getting paid more, so it's a development of a leadership skill. Now the issue is that most leadership training, management training and development is done from a position of a dirty old textbook or dusty old textbook that goes, this is radical candor, or, this is the trust equation. And there's all of this great theory, but on a practical level, how you then translate that in a digital environment is completely different. But the people who figured out are Gen Z, right? So when I first started training in this space, and how do you show up in a virtual environment in a really incredible way, is I designed and delivered this program myself. And then I was like, well, this is ladled with hypocrisy because I am not natively the best at doing this. So this is why we partnered with the esports team. We worked with one of their content creators, and we designed and delivered the program together. And then eventually I went, well, we've designed and delivered together. You may as well just deliver it yourself now, because your expertise your credibility and your expertise far exceeds mine in this domain. And so as I was facilitating, I was learning. It is incredibly difficult, not because it's technically hard, but facilitating online conversations like a live streamer is different to how you're doing it now. So I think there's that element of bringing in some thinking and some experience from a generation and a technology that isn't in the workplace already. And then that's where the stand-up comedy comes in, because you then flip it the other way around. Well, how do you do the same with Gen Z to do it in person? It was like, well, then we'll leverage stand-up comedy to do that, rather than how do you do really good presentation skills? There's breathing techniques and there's preparation and the storytelling, the structure of a great story and all that kind of stuff is all great. But you can read about that and understand that. But how do you get yourself to be able to stand up in front of people and talk credibly? Essentially, you have to just do it. And all of this is, in both situations, is understand what a stand-up comedian or a live streamer is doing, and then you have to try and do it yourself. And what we don't do with training is create the moment, the opportunity for someone to then do that. But in both the programs I deliver, for the virtual or the in-person one, do a 5-minute talk in front of a load of people. Doesn't have to be funny. I'm not trying to make you a stand-up comedian, but do a 5-minute talk in front of people. The meat one is do a live stream on LinkedIn, and don't have a guest. Do it by yourself.
Yeah. You got to say your practice. It's got to happen. And I think you're making me think about you mentioned about the influencers, like whether it's TikTok, Instagram, whatever it is, they have to construct it's a process, it's a format, a formula. The difficulty is the authenticity in that. And that's what, when you're speaking, comes to my mind is it can be quite easy to get up and speak. It's not easy to show up as yourself, be comfortable around that, talk around your topic clearly, articulately, maybe not, and be engaging. And I think more so than ever, people like to engage with people who haven't got their shit all together, quite frankly. They like it when there's a bit of humanness of, oops, that didn't quite, but you have to be comfortable in order to fluff up. You've got to be comfortable in order for things to go left, right, up, down, in, out, and that you can get yourself out of that situation and navigate it. And I don't know that many people have got the nerve to do that.
So why? Why don't you think that? Because that happens more often in work than it does outside of work. But why do you think that is?
I think that people don't want to look foolish or stupid. And so, it's...
What's going to be the worst thing that happens if someone looks stupid or...
It's fear. I mean, people are just fearful of something.
But you're more fearful. You'll be more fearful in the workplace because there is going to be some ramification that if you get something wrong. So what you then go back to is actually, regardless of your organizational culture, the culture of work is a fear of failure in the workplace. That if I do something wrong or stupid, I will get made redundant. I'll get fired.
Ability goes. Absolutely.
So for that, what you can't really do, you're trying to then have to redesign the framework of your workplace to enable that to happen, and that you can only do that by, making the stand-up comedy inspired presentation skills and the live streaming inspired presentation skills, you have to make sure that your whole organization at least has an awareness of what those things are like. Because,
Yes.
I could go in and deliver, and have done, like for a large company, I could take a cohort of 12, get them all to, host meetings as if they were a live streamer, and they'd be really good at it. But they'd soon stop doing it. Even though I gave them that point where they had to perform and do it, they'd soon stop doing it because they'd revert to type. So you have to take everyone. And this is why, large organizations, huge organizations aren't necessarily my target market, because I fundamentally believe that they are too entrenched to unpick all of that stuff.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
I'm not going to waste my
No,
time
you're right.
to
Yeah.
do that.
Where do you have the biggest impact? Yeah, in psychology, there's something called drive theory, if anyone's familiar with that. There are people that naturally, so if you think about a juggler on the street, a juggler, juggle lots of things. There are some people that can juggle very good at home and no one's watching them. The minute they think that someone's watching them, they can't. It's the same as typing. You ever get people going, oh, someone's watching me and I'm making all these mistakes. I don't normally do that. And I don't know why I put on that silly voice when I did it, but I did. Anyway, and the juggler in a square that's got sort of, or somebody that's entertaining, like walks into that ownership of, I'm going to drop balls, I'm going to do things wrong, and I'm just going to have fun with it because that is a part of the act, so to speak, kind of thing. And it makes me think about how you're right, the conditioning, the environment. It's the environment that helps us to kind of go, oh, this is how we should be. This is how it must be, because it's, and whether it's expressed or not, it's just conditioned to be that way. So balls to that, get out the rule book and kind of go freestyle. Let's get in some comedy,
Well,
it's just
and,
good.
And that's where, your small to medium businesses can play in that space now, because they have the adaptability to do that. And, they could do it more than a large organization. I gave a talk at Disrupt HR Birmingham 2 or 3 years ago now. And I was like, realistically, the future of HR, people development, L&D, whatever you want to call it, is in the small to medium market, because no large organization, unless they've got an incredible leader and a team that's willing to go on that journey with them, is going to be able to do the transformation that's needed in this space.
Yeah.
I mean, the last corporate job I had, we were going to go and redesign the L&D strategy, the L&D offering to the organization, all that kind of stuff. And then it's like, this is a 3-year roadmap. It's like, I can't be bothered. I cannot be bothered to wait 3 years for this to happen, because I'm incredibly impatient. Some people are, you've got those, those people who build their lives around their career for various different reasons. I would never say that is a better or worse decision. It just is whatever's right for your life, right? But for me, at the pace I want to move, and if I want to have a real impact on the world, that 3 years, I think everything in that 3 years you could achieve in 6 months or less.
Oh, absolutely.
But the framework has led you to believe that it has to be a 3-month transformation program because of the politics, the structure, the people, and then it's like, well, then that's the thing you need to fix. You need to fix the structure and the politics and the people. You don't need to deliver this 3-year transformation program because you're delivering it in an environment and a system that doesn't work. So you have to redesign the environment system. And unfortunately, when you're at a senior leadership position in a corporate world, you're not really incentivized to do that. You're incentivized to make these baby steps across this against this strategy, not rock the boat too much, because the perception in most organizations is that actually the operating model we have is pretty much optimum until we need to do a large round of redundancies, which we then re-optimize and re-optimize and re-optimize. But it's all under the guise of optimization without really any substantial metrics other than this is our headcount and this is the spend on that headcount, this is our turnover and this is our market share, and how are these two things playing into each other, when actually the metrics that sit behind all of that are way more nuanced and involved that HR or people team go into over and above a pulse survey.
Yes, there's a lot of good points in there. So I'm going to go down another little rabbit hole. So 3 years transformation, 6 months. So the first thing that comes to my mind is AI. Of course it does, because it's compounding. a lot of our it's amplifying, compounding, consolidating, doing an awful lot for us. How's it changing your work? How's it changing your clients? How is it helping you to achieve that in 6 months?
How long you got? There's a long list of things. I think some of the stuff I've seen from the work we've done is that again, if I look at the small to medium businesses in particular, they don't have the budget, the capability, or the budget to develop the capability to do this in a meaningful way. So I see in the small to medium business market, there's a huge lag behind AI adoption and innovation compared to large corporates.
Yes.
Which is bizarre because that is completely against what I just told you, that these smaller companies are more agile and able to change. And so what you end up with is you only know what you know. And this is what the small to medium business market, some of the small to medium businesses I've worked with, they've only ever been a small to medium business, or the people leading them have only been in small to medium business. So they have no idea how a large corporate works. So what I'm in a fortunate position to do is cherry pick some of the best stuff and leave the worst stuff that the large corporates are doing with AI, and apply those learnings to a small to medium business. I'm very fortunate to be able to bridge that gap and help the organizations I believe that are redesigning the future of work. So I think that there's that, but then there's also how you apply human-centered design and product thinking to employee experience. What was probably costing a client, 3 months and 30 grand for me to do a piece of work 4 years ago is now taking 5 grand and a week.
Yeah.
And now
more accessible.
Well, exactly. And so I can now deliver that to small to medium businesses because it's at a price point and a time frame that they can work in. I would rather do something for 5 grand in a week than 30 grand over 3 months.
Absolutely.
And I know the output of that human-centered design discovery that I would do for 30 grand over 3 months, the mammoth report that was put together, even a large corporate, like they would only take one recommendation out there out of a list of 20 and do anything meaningful with it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you deliver it to small to medium business, they're incredibly grateful because they're like, these things I can affect a change in. And what we're in the game of now is like presenting, doing the discovery and problem definition for our clients, and then say, well, these are the things you can do. You don't need us to do those. We can take 1, 2, and 3, but you should do 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
And if you also want to do 1, 2, and 3 yourself, then that's fine. Whereas a large corporate will pay for that large piece of work and go, well, I need to redesign the webinar that people get on their first day. So I'm going to take this one recommendation and chuck all the others in the bin. Not because they don't want to do those things, but because they're not accountable for them. And there isn't the infrastructure to give that insight in a meaningful way to another part of the organization for them to affect that change.
Yeah, it makes it kind of. I did a webinar the other night, and I'm like, to do a handbook review, and I know that that's not your jam, but like if a handbook review was normally about 5K job, it can take many iterations. It's really kind of like risk. There's a lot of risk, compliance, stuff like that. Certainly for clients. Now you can do with $20 a month. It's like, get with the program, people. There are accessibility, and we need to be looking at not having everything perfection, but for right now. So, and the speed of action. So the human can't compute the same way as AI, nor do we want it to. We have to remember that the human intelligence is an an artificial intelligence is super intelligence. Like these two things combined can really help us to I think that's where we need to get better at in the future. And I know my PhD is positioned to do that. So I want to design a whole new org model, which is people, profit, processes, and planet. One doesn't. I don't think one exists today, which is purposeful for the future of what we're going. So certainly not now, and it's not going to be for the future. Most chief people officers can't tell me at all what the future is going to like in 2 to 5 years. They just can't. They can't imagine it. They don't know. And I'd say that that's largely millennials and Gen X and millennials, because they don't live in that. They haven't grown up in that digital environment. So the opportunity for them is enormous. I do think that they want to go go with it, but I think that there's so much unknown. And I get asked all the time, visualize. I need to visualize what this is going to be. And that's really hard to articulate. And it's very dry sometimes. I don't want to get out technical flows and start doing optimizing workflows to demonstrate, because that's very boring. But it also comes back down to the humour side, isn't it? Of something that is AI is changing the way that we work, and it's all got far noisy and everything AI, and a lot of it's bullshit. I have to say, a lot of it's clickbait, and but people will say what they do because they can. They've got the forum to do it. But I do think coming back down to the humour aspect is what makes you credible, what makes people want to listen to you, what makes people want to follow you, what makes people want to engage with you, is personality, is having an energy that is magnetic, charismatic. Now, not everyone can be magnetic and charismatic to everyone else, but I think of batteries. Magnets, not batteries. Magnets do one of two things. They either go or you can't get them to go together. They're doing that. And I feel like all of us are magnets to different people. We can repel and we can attract, just as humans.
I think we all have the opportunity to be magnets, but I think we design workplaces for us to try and be the middle, to be polar, to be north and south polarized.
Yes.
Right. So and that's the issue, that is the place, because if there is any opposition to that, in every organization I've been in, I have been slightly rebellious. And that's seen as a troublemaker, not as a progressive, forward-thinking, innovative person. And it's like, well, you can never tell me. And when people were talking about, we want entrepreneurs, impossible, because your internal entrepreneurs will want to buck the trend. They will want to go against the status quo. But what your workplace is designed is for compliance to the status quo. And this is, I think, just go back to talking about handbooks and policies. HR. If you're in HR or you're a HR consultant and you're delivering policies and handbooks, congratulations, you're about to go out of business very quickly. Or, as some consultants I'm talking to, it's a race to the bottom because people are just doing it cheaper and cheaper. If I ever have a client that says I need to update my policies and my handbook, I'm like, cool, do it yourself. Program a GPT to do it and get that done. Now, what I'm not saying is just get ChatGPT to do it, but you've got to have the human in the loop, right? And so I can review stuff for you. I can certainly look at it, but I am not even going to open the document until you've done at least the bare minimum to use the tool, because we've democratized knowledge. What we're doing with ChatGPT, it isn't necessarily about the creativity at the moment and all that kind of stuff. It's about the democratization of knowledge. So, the law professional face very much the same thing, is that you can democratize case law and knowledge, and therefore it has to be about the interpersonal skill of storytelling, presenting a convincing argument and stuff like that. And so, those industries have to become, every industry will have to become more human-centric, but it'll be done because you're powered by AI and human in the loop. But the issue then you have there is, again, when I was in large corporates, was I thinking about what the future of my job role and the future of the industry was? Absolutely not.
No.
Because I was like, I have to deliver the time here, the here and now. I've got a list of things to do. I've got a list of emails. I do not have the time and space to think about what my job is going to be in the future, regardless if the organization wanted me to or not. You just don't have the space. So it's no criticism of anybody who works in an internal role, certainly a large organization, because you don't have the time, space, or even the agency to be able to do that. Because the whole framework of work has been, here comes the aeroplane. Here's your industry. This is how it's changing. Here's your new job role. That has always been spoon-fed to you. We've never had to work in an age where we've had to define what our place is going to be in the future of work. And particularly in HR, you have to. You have to be able to do that, because if you don't, you will have to go and do something else. Because the work you're doing currently will get taken away from you. Not in its entirety, but the vast majority. And if the vast majority's gone, well, I'm not going to pay you a full salary for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know what I mean? I know an organisation just got rid of 7 HR people because they couldn't quantify, once they put this technology in, what they would do in the space that's left. So it's like, well, I have to get rid of you.
AI is fundamentally changing our lives, not just our business, like life in general. In the pandemic, knowledge was king. People were paying to access knowledge because that's what they were selling, because they could online. And now that's completely been taken away. It's like, you don't need to be a subject. Lots of people ask me why I'm doing a PhD. You don't need to. You can do PhD research on the point is critical thinking and creativity must be kept alive. because the human is behind AI, right? And it's going to continue to be behind AI. There are some things for me that maybe because I am a Gen X that I will not subscribe to. And I run an AI consultancy, so I am pro. But there are some things I don't want it to rob me of, which is the human spirit. You cannot, for me, there is space, like going back to the stage, being able to walk on the stage and be able to improvise and react to what is in front of you in that here and now, in some sensible way, like making sense to the audience, is really, really, really hard. And I think it's going to get harder. And so I see that skill, soft skill, as necessary, critical actually. And I think once the AI noise dies down, because it will be business as usual at some point, I think that we're going to quickly see that we need some soft skills, we need some human skills, we need to rediscover our humanness, and we need to foster it, we need to harness it.
But you have to do that. But you have to do that now. You can't wait until
Yeah,
you need
great.
to do it. And I think
Yes.
that's what most people are doing, right? I think. Well, if I go back to, the critical thinking and kind of just thinking about stuff, right? When I wrote my dissertation in 2008, 2009, I predicted that podcasts would be like the primary form of media. And at the time, the most popular podcasts, the top 5 podcasts in the UK, were BBC podcasts that were just highlights reels of radio shows that happened in the week. So they completely, those type of podcasts still exist, but the form has completely changed.
Changed, yeah.
But that was probably the last time before I kind of, started doing Freeformers, is where I had the opportunity to think, well, what does the future look like? I had the time and space to be able to think, well, what does that look like? And it just so happened with that with that bet, I kind of I was spot on. I'm not saying I'm going to be spot on all the time, but I was able to make some, reasonable, like plays about what the future may look like. And no one wants to do that as a hobby, because unless it's the future of your hobby, right?
Yeah.
Do I have any hobbies? No. But like,
Yes, you do. You've got children, you've got hobbies.
no, that's just a different type of work. And so
True.
you've got to have that time and space. And at the moment, the only people that are doing that are entrepreneurs. Why? Because they're looking for new market opportunities to make money. When you have a job, you don't have to look to a new market opportunity to make money, because the money just drops into your account at the end of every month. Regardless if you've innovated or not, it still happens.
Yes. Yes.
And I think this is my biggest frustration with every job I've had, not just in corporates, is that regardless of how much I pushed myself, I innovated, I tried to do things differently and push the organization forward, I was still remunerated exactly the same as the person to the left or the right of me. So was there ever any benefit to me going out of my lane, trying to push things and do things differently and drive the organization forward? Absolutely not. What a waste of time. And I wouldn't get exceeding expectations in a performance stream, because it's like, well, you're going against the status quo. So like the whole framework of work is incorrect. I'm doing a really interesting project at the moment that there is a common trend in some large organizations where they're just getting rid of performance reviews, because it does nothing to add to the pace at which you need to develop, but also where you need to develop as well. It doesn't do anything for your organization. So they're moving into a more adaptive and agile model to help that your continual development work. Now, remains to be seen whether it'll work or not, but
yeah, it has to be the future. Now, talking about predictions, because our time is going to come to a close, which I don't want it to, but you've got to be with your clients. I'm so grateful you've been here. So I'm going to move into, if you want to, what would you predict? Like, have you got any other predictions that you did with the podcast, your dissertation, that you might want to say in X months or years from now, I believe this is going to happen?
So I made a prediction at the turn of the decade that email as a form of internal communication would die within 10 years. I've got 4 years left. I probably think I'm going to fall short of the 10-year prediction, but I still believe that will be true. What is email? It's a digital letter. Okay, post. It's digital post. What load of garbage? Newsletters, vouchers. Email is one of the worst forms of communication, with all the amazing technology we've had in the world to drive different thoughts, feelings, and thinking in people, the biggest form of communication outside the world of work is social media. But inside the world of work, it's email. And those two forms of media are light years apart. So when you have an internal comms department that spend, a couple of weeks drafting an email to go to the whole company, it's like, what a waste of time. No one's going to pay any attention to it. And also, they're not measuring open rate, click-through rate, or anything like that anyway. So the problem is they don't have any substantial evidence to say that email isn't working, other than, well, my job is to send out emails, so I will send out emails. So I think the most forward-thinking organizations have already cottoned on to that, right? You've got Slack and Teams and all those different ways of talking to people. But then you just look at the complete misuse of Teams, chats and channels, just the differentiation between chats and channels. Hop onto a Discord server and see how you actually manage chats and channels. Because in Teams, everyone just goes into chats and group chats. And it's like, well, you haven't got threads, you've not got your digital communication inside your organization is fundamentally broken. So the short answer is, I still believe in that prediction that internal email would die out, but I think it's going to take longer than I initially anticipated.
I would say that when the organisation is fully Gen Z enabled, I will suspect that I'm in your camp, because email's too slow for that one reason.
And look, you talk about change and transformation. The easiest thing that you could do to transform your culture in terms of digital communication is turn email off. That would change it. That would change it. Don't spend millions of pounds on a change program. Remove the ability for someone to send an internal email. What will everyone do? They'll go and find somewhere else. But no organization, especially the large ones, are big enough and brave enough to do that. Now, of course, with email, with external conversations, fine. I still get that. That's a lot harder of a mechanic to do.
Yes. But if you're doing is forcing something, and actually it's like me saying getting a text message, right? So it's like me saying getting a text message, and I'm saying don't send me a text message, call me, and I text back to say don't text me, call me. It's kind of that situation. Just don't respond and pick up the phone. Like people, so what people don't realise, I think as adults, we think that we've got all our shit together. And some people might think they do. And they might think that they're a better version of themselves because they're aging or for whatever reason. The point is, when you're a child and you've got children, we all learn. And how do we learn? Watch, repeat. Hear, repeat. Watch, repeat, hear. No different as an adult. No different as an adult.
Well, and this, both the training I did to be a professional wrestler and a stand-up comedian.
Oh my God, we didn't even touch the wrestler. What's going on?
Just drop that in at the end. But the thing that unites both of those experiences, I didn't have an expert in psychology or culture or training delivering those. I had a professional wrestler and a stand-up comedian teaching me those.
That's it.
And what did we do? We practiced. We had either a 2-hour session every week or two 2-hour sessions every week. And then there was a moment where I had to perform on both of those. I either had to wrestle someone in front of 300 people, perform comedy in front of 200 people. And do you know what the biggest thing I did? Is either I voice noted my stand-up comedy to myself, or I recorded myself doing wrestling moves and I watched them back and I developed there. So there's no videos, there's no resources, no guides, no psychology. It was just like, get on, do it, watch it, learn from other people, be with a group of people that are trying to achieve the same objective as well, kind of a bit of social motivation, and have a point where you have to perform. We over-engineer learning, development, and change in organizations. Why? Because that's what we're paid to do. We have to do enough activities to substantiate that we have a full-time job. Whereas if you said, right, I need to bring in a person to help my organization do digital communication much better through Microsoft Teams. All I would do is say, cool, turn internal email off. And then come back to me in 6 months whether you still need any help or not. But no one will do that. Why will no one do that? The consultant won't do that because it's like, well, I've just lost a 3-year transformation project. And the business won't do it because it's like, well, it's too hard to get that, just to ask the tech team to do it. It's not possible or whatever like that. So
there'll always be reasons and excuses, but you're right. If you want radical change, you have to be prepared to do something radical. And we're in radical times, Toby. We're in radical times.
Well, this will be the last thing I say, then I will shut up. But Microsoft created Yammer, an internal social network, right?
Yeah.
Because they saw that social networks outside the world of work were breeding great communication, user-generated content, cross-collaboration, all this kind of stuff. That's the in-work name for all this stuff that happens outside the world of work. Every organization I've ever worked with that's had Yammer and tried to use Yammer goes, oh, it's rubbish, Yammer's rubbish. It's like, Yammer is not rubbish. It does exactly the same thing as Facebook. did at that time.
Yes.
What's rubbish is your ability to create the culture in which that's where the communication happens,
Yeah.
because you're asking people to go to a different place. And where's the communication happening at the moment? Oh, an email. Cool. Well, have you turned email off? No. So what? You're expecting people to just to switch over and embrace this new form
They
of...
should know what to do. They should know what to do, because same old
Yeah,
conditioning.
and it's not the technology, it's a people problem. And that's the thing
Oh,
that I've probably beaten the drum for the past 8 years. It's a people problem, not
you know,
technology.
we used to say when in my 20s, and I'm now in my 50s, we used to say the problems between the chair and the keyboard, and I'd say that still remains exactly today, 30
I'm borrowing
years.
that. I like that.
Anyway, we're at our time. Toby, thank you so much for being here. I've so enjoyed this. Hour's flown by together nearly. So thank you so much for being here. I've enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule. And anybody that, you know, hopefully this has been enjoyable for you listeners, click the subscribe button and connect with Toby. See how Toby can be in your organisation, or maybe you've been inspired by Toby to go and follow your own path and develop something which is maybe a life skill. But think about how we connect with humans and how we can have impact in the world. And it is going to come back down to our personal presence. So thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you.
Well, and thank you for having me, and thank you. Just go back to the full circle. Thank you for inviting me to, pick up the trophy on your behalf as well. It was a great honour to, get that trophy as Leader of the Year, which is fully deserved. So yeah. Absolutely.
Thank you,
great.
thank you. I can't thank you enough. So much love. I did like to send out the love hearts. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for listening. And until next time, we will see you soon. And maybe you can just find some time to go and laugh and have some humour in your life, because life can be a bit serious. So go and enjoy some humour. Bye for now. See you next time. Bye.